What's up guys, welcome to Knox Out Comics, where we talk all things comics and manga. I'm Jay, and today, as requested by Ultimate Killer Combat X, I'm going to be covering the first volume of Ant from Arcana Studios and later Image Comics. The comic starts with an 8-year-old girl named Hannah Washington and her father Danny as they're on their way to Hannah's school. It's her first day and she's not feeling it at all, and as Danny tries to cheer her up, they get pulled over by the police. With Danny being arrested as a suspect of murder, Hannah begins to write in her diary as a way to escape from all the pain she's feeling. One of the officers, Inez, escorts Hannah to school where she's bullied by her classmates. She later meets the new principal, Mrs. Joyce, who inquires about her art and journal. Hannah tells her that the character in her stories is Ant, and that's who she's going to become when she grows up. But Mrs. Joyce just chalks it up to Hannah's imagination. On her way home, one of Hannah's classmates throws a rock at her and knocks her down. One of her peers, Steven, tries to help out, but not wanting his help, Hannah storms off, leaving behind her journal. Steven gets curious and promises himself that he'll return it to her after reading. And as he begins to read, we see what's going on in Hannah's story. In the story, Hannah is a superhero called Ant, an adult version of herself with apparent superhuman strength and acrobatic prowess. We see her as she subdues two criminals who are on the run from the police, and that's where Steven stops reading. We cut to Danny, who's been released from jail due to lack of evidence, as he's waiting with the neighbor for Hannah to come home. When Hannah finally arrives home, she's ecstatic that her father is back, but it's short-lived as she goes to her room and realizes that her journal is missing. Meanwhile, Danny is talking to Hannah's mother, Betty. He tells her that if something were to happen to him, he needs her to take care of Hannah, but she's hesitant and doesn't really give an answer. We then see Officer Inez and her boss at the precinct. He tells her that the murder victim, Paul Hugo, was a powerful man in the city and had a hand in building their department, and the FBI is pressuring him for an arrest. He wants her to do whatever she has to catch the murderer. We then cut to Steven calling Hannah from her window, telling her that he's found her journal. When he returns it, Hannah knows he read it, but he tells her how awesome it is, which leads to her telling Steven all about Ant before telling him the rest of her story. In the story, she catches up with a wanted criminal called Wheezy. She beats him down but is attacked by the police force. As Ant is fighting the police, the story is interrupted by Hannah telling Steven that something very bad is about to happen and he needs to go. We then see Danny getting laid off due to the investigation, and then Ryan, the son of Paul Hugo, warns Danny to stay away from Betty, who he's dating, and accuses him of being involved in his father's murder. Danny punches him out and heads home, where he finds Hannah having a seizure. But before he can do anything, the police burst in and places him under arrest for Paul Hugo's murder. At the precinct, Danny is interrogated by a racist cop who has evidence that links him to Paul's murder. Then Officer Inez intervenes, and Danny tells her about how he and Paul were talking about his future, and when he left, Paul was very much alive. He didn't kill Paul, and he doesn't know who did. We then see Betty picking up Hannah from social services, but Betty believes that Danny killed Paul for money. This angers Hannah because she knows it's not true. She tells Betty that if she wants to help her find her journal before storming off. Later, Betty manages to find Hannah's story and starts reading. In the story, Ant is attacked by a giant cockroach and ends up losing her exoskeleton that grants her powers. We then cut back to Betty as she realizes it was a mistake to leave Hannah and Danny and vows to be there for Hannah now. At the Hugo estate, Betty receives a package for Ryan, and incidentally she overhears him on the phone with someone, telling them that he wanted something burned, but instead they sent it to his house. Then he walks out to see Betty holding the package behind her back, asking her what it is. Ryan suspiciously questions Betty until she's finally able to prove that she doesn't have anything behind her back. She hid the package under a desk as Ryan apologizes and tells her that he's going to be a better man for her. We then cut to Hannah with a therapist and demonstrates knowledge of things no fourth grader should know. The therapist thinks that Hannah's belief in Ant is dangerous, and she shouldn't spend so much time in a fantasy world. After being escorted to her room, Hannah sees her diary, and the therapist tells her that her mom found it and wrote a note for her. In the note, Betty says no one can change overnight, and she hopes that Hannah can forgive her for leaving. After the therapist leaves, Hannah begins to write more of the story, and we see Hannah, still out of her exoskeleton, trying to evade the cockroach. Eventually, Steven, now an adult, rescues her and gives her a can that recharges her blood sugar and thus allowing her exoskeleton to grow back. This allows Ant to quickly defeat the cockroach, and as Hannah questions Wheezy, she realizes who set her dad up. Back in the real world, Betty goes to open the package from earlier, which turns out to be a VHS tape. When Betty plays the tape, it reveals that Ryan had killed his father, just as he appears behind her. He's about to shoot Betty, but he's shot in the head by Officer Inez. Later, all the charges against Danny are dropped. Then Hannah is reunited with both her parents and declare that they can be a family again. But of course this is short-lived when Officer Inez asks Hannah who told her that Ryan had set up her dad. Hannah says it was Wheezy, but Inez tells her that's impossible. If she were Ant, she would have gotten that information 10 years into the future. This causes Hannah to pass out, and the next time we see her she's older and in a mental institute, and hasn't spoken a word since. Betty visits her and tries to comfort her, saying that she wishes Hannah were Ant. Maybe then Danny would still be alive. We cut back to Betty alerting a doctor that Hannah spoke with her, asking who killed Danny. And when they rush back to Hannah's room, Hannah's escaped, leaving behind a can of what regenerated her exoskeleton earlier. And that was the first volume of Ant. I hope you guys liked this video. If you did, click like and subscribe, and I will see you guys next time.